The observation vessel hung in the darkness of space like a silent predator watching its prey. Commander Verath stood on the bridge of the distant eye with his three-fingered hands clasped behind his back. His silver skin reflected the dim blue lights of the control panels around him. He had been assigned many missions during his 40 years of service to the Galactic Council, but this one felt different somehow. The planet below them glowed with blues and greens wrapped in swirling white clouds. The humans called it Earth. Verath turned to his diplomatic officer who stood beside him examining a data screen. Xena was from the Taurian Collective, a species known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and skilled negotiations. Her large golden eyes scanned the information without blinking. She had requested this assignment specifically because she believed first contact with new species was the most important work anyone could do. Verath respected her idealism even if he did not always share it. The third member of their core team sat at the tactical station running combat simulations. Kruv belonged to the warrior caste of Drak, a species that had learned peace only after centuries of brutal warfare. His thick gray hide bore scars from his youth, before the Drak had joined the Council. He understood violence in ways that most Council species did not. That was why Verath had requested him for this mission. The mission brief had been simple enough. A new species had achieved faster-than-light travel 6 months ago. Their first experimental vessel had crossed into deep space and triggered automated Council detection systems. Standard protocol required observation and assessment before making contact. The Council needed to know if these humans were ready to join galactic civilization. More importantly, they needed to know if the humans posed any danger. Verath walked to the main viewport and stared at the blue planet. Somewhere down there, billions of humans lived their lives completely unaware that they were being watched. They had no idea that thousands of species existed among the stars. They did not know that their little planet sat on the edge of Council territory. Everything was about to change for them. Xena approached and stood beside him. Her voice was soft and musical as always. She said that the preliminary scans showed a relatively young civilization with significant technological development. She noted that they had split the atom and developed computers within the same century. She added that their population had reached 8 billion individuals spread across most of their planet's landmasses. By all standard measurements, they appeared ready for contact. Verath nodded slowly but said nothing. He had learned long ago that initial assessments could be deceiving. The universe had taught him to be cautious. Kruv called out from his station that he had something interesting. The military analyst had been reviewing Earth's communication networks and historical databases. What he found made him uncomfortable. He shared his screen with the main display. Images and text flooded across the view screen showing human history. Verath and Xena watched in growing surprise. The humans had been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts like most species experienced, but constant and brutal warfare. Kruv scrolled through the data showing thousands of battles, hundreds of wars, and dozens of empires that had risen and fallen through conquest. The humans had developed weapons of incredible destructive power. They had created bombs that could destroy entire cities. They had engineered diseases as weapons. They had built machines designed only to kill other humans. Xena stepped back from the display with her hand covering her mouth. She whispered that this could not be accurate. Surely no species could survive such continuous violence. But the data was clear and verified through multiple sources. The humans had fought each other relentlessly while somehow still advancing their civilization. Verath studied the information with growing concern. He asked Kruv to show him their most recent conflicts. The Drak warrior pulled up records from the last 100 years. Even in their modern era, with advanced technology and global communication, the humans continued to wage war. They had fought 2 massive planetary conflicts that killed millions. They had developed nuclear weapons and actually used them against each other. Even now, in their current age, armed conflicts raged in multiple regions of their planet. Kruv added that human military technology was remarkably sophisticated. For a species that had only just achieved spaceflight, their weapon systems showed unusual innovation. He pointed out their development of stealth technology, precision-guided weapons, and autonomous combat systems. He noted that humans had militarized their orbital space with satellites designed for warfare. They had even begun planning weapons platforms in space itself. Xena argued that this was exactly why they needed Council guidance. She said the humans were clearly a violent species who needed to be taught better ways. The Council could help them overcome their aggressive nature and join the peaceful galactic community. She insisted that isolation would only make them more dangerous. Verath considered her words carefully. The Taurian was right that the Council's purpose was to guide younger species toward peace, but he also knew that some species could not be easily changed. The Drac had required 2 centuries of careful intervention before they abandoned their warrior culture. Some species had never fully adapted and remained restricted to their home systems under Council supervision. He asked Crew for his professional assessment. The warrior studied the data for a long moment before responding. He said that humans fought differently than most species. Their tactics showed creativity and adaptability. They seemed to enjoy the challenge of combat in ways that troubled him. He noted that human entertainment frequently glorified warfare and conflict. Their children played games that simulated battle. Their stories celebrated warriors and conquerors. Violence was woven into their culture at every level. Verath made his decision. He ordered the distant eye to maintain position and continue observation. He wanted detailed information about human military capabilities before they made contact. He specifically wanted to know about the vessel that had achieved faster-than-light travel. If the humans had weaponized their first starship, it would tell him much about their intentions. Kroof worked his controls and brought up information about the human deep space vessel. It was called the UNSS Defiance, a name that Verath found oddly appropriate. The ship was commanded by a human named Jake Morrison. According to intercepted communications, Captain Morrison was considered one of their finest officers. The Defiance carried a crew of 200 humans and was equipped with weapon systems, though they appeared primitive by Council standards. Verath watched the blue planet rotate slowly below them. Somewhere down there, Captain Morrison and his crew prepared for their next mission into deep space. They had no idea they were being studied like specimens in a laboratory. Verath felt a slight discomfort at the deception, but it was necessary. The Council needed to understand what kind of species humanity truly was before revealing themselves. He told Xena to prepare a preliminary report for the Council. He wanted them to know that humans were technologically capable, but potentially dangerous. He recommended a cautious approach to first contact. He suggested that they conduct a limited test of human capabilities before making any final decisions. Xena looked troubled, but agreed to prepare the report. She asked what kind of test he had in mind. Verath turned from the viewport and walked back to his command chair. He said they would know soon enough. For now, they would watch and learn. The humans had survived thousands of years of warfare against themselves. The question was how they would respond to a threat from the stars. The distant eye continued its silent vigil above Earth, while its crew gathered information and made their assessments. Below them, humanity went about its daily existence, unaware that their future hung in the balance. The galaxy was about to meet a species unlike any it had encountered before. Verath just hoped the Council was ready for what that meant. The Council's response came faster than Verath expected. 3 days after he submitted his preliminary report, he received encrypted orders directly from the High Assembly. They had reviewed his concerns about human military capabilities and agreed that testing was necessary. The message included specifications for an automated drone fleet that would be deployed to the edge of the human solar system. The drones would simulate a raider attack without risking actual Council lives. Verath was authorized to observe and document the human response. Kroof oversaw the deployment of the drone fleet from his tactical station. 60 automated vessels materialized near the orbit of the giant planet the humans called Jupiter. Each drone was programmed with standard Council combat patterns and equipped with weapons calibrated to match what primitive raiders might possess. The programming was designed to probe human defenses without causing catastrophic damage. Kroof had set the difficulty level to what he considered appropriate for a newly spacefaring species. Xena objected to the entire plan. She stood beside Verath's command chair with her arms crossed. She argued that deceiving the humans was wrong and potentially dangerous. If they discovered the test was orchestrated by the Council, it could poison any future relationship. She said there had to be better ways to assess a species than attacking them. Verath understood her concerns but explained that the Council needed concrete data about human military responses. Words and promises meant nothing without understanding how a species actually behaved under pressure. On Earth, alarms blared through the orbital command station called Guardian 1. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat in her command center, watching dozens of screens light up with warnings. Long-range sensors had detected unknown vessels entering the solar system near Jupiter. The signatures did not match any known human spacecraft. She had been preparing for this moment ever since the Defiance made its first faster-than-light journey. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and apparently, not everyone out there was friendly. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel to the Defiance, which was conducting patrol exercises near Mars. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on her screen. She briefed him quickly on the situation and ordered him to intercept the unknown vessels. She told him to proceed with caution, but defend human territory if attacked. Morrison acknowledged the orders with a calm professionalism that reminded her why he had been chosen to command humanity's first deep space vessel. The bridge of the Defiance transformed into controlled chaos as the crew rushed to battle stations. Navigator Lisa Chen plotted the fastest course to Jupiter while calling out distance calculations. Weapons Officer Danny Brooks ran diagnostics on their missile systems and energy cannons. Chief Engineer Karen White diverted additional power to the engines and shields. Everyone moved with practiced efficiency, the result of endless drills and training. Lieutenant Chris Parker sat at the tactical station analyzing the sensor data. He was young for his position, but had proven himself repeatedly during simulations. He studied the enemy formation carefully and noticed something odd. The vessels were arranged in a pattern that seemed almost textbook perfect. It reminded him of military academy exercises rather than actual pirate raiders. He mentioned this observation to Captain Morrison, but added that they should proceed as if the threat was real. Morrison ordered the ship to maximum speed. The Defiance accelerated toward Jupiter with its crew ready for combat. He called up his squadron commanders on the communication system. Kelly Rogers led Alpha Wing, Victor Hayes commanded Beta Wing, and Sam Mitchell ran Gamma Wing. Each wing consisted of 6 fighter craft that could be launched from the Defiance's hangar bays. Morrison told them to prepare for immediate deployment upon arrival. Back on the distant eye, Vereth watched the human response with interest. The Defiance was moving faster than he anticipated. Their reaction time was impressive. Zena stood beside him looking worried. She asked again if this was truly necessary. Vereth ignored the question and told crew to activate the drone fleet's combat protocols. The automated vessels detected the approaching human ship and adjusted their formation accordingly. Their programming directed them to appear threatening while avoiding lethal force. The drones powered up their weapon systems and began moving to intercept the Defiance. Everything was proceeding exactly as crew had planned. Captain Morrison studied the enemy vessels on his tactical display. 60 ships against 1 seemed like poor odds, but he had faced worse in simulations. He asked Danny Brooks for a weapons assessment. The officer reported that the enemy vessels appeared lightly armed compared to the Defiance, but their numbers provided a significant advantage. Morrison made his decision quickly. He would not wait for the enemy to dictate the terms of engagement. He ordered the launch of all fighter wings simultaneously. The Defiance's hangar bays opened and 18 small craft shot out into space. Kelly Rogers immediately took Alpha Wing high above the enemy formation. Victor Hayes brought Beta Wing low and to the left. Sam Mitchell held Gamma Wing back as a reserve force. The pilots moved with precision that came from training together for months. Morrison then did something that made Vereth lean forward in his command chair. Instead of hanging back to provide support fire, the Defiance accelerated directly toward the center of the enemy formation. Lisa Chen called out a warning about collision risks, but Morrison told her to trust him. Karen White routed emergency power to the forward shields as the ship plunged into the drone fleet. Crew watched in disbelief as the human tactics unfolded. This was not how newly spacefaring species were supposed to fight. They should have formed a defensive position and tried to negotiate or call for help. Instead, the humans had split their forces and attacked aggressively from multiple angles. The drone programming struggled to adapt to such unconventional behavior. Kelly Rogers led Alpha Wing in a diving attack that caught 3 drones completely off guard. Her pilots fired their missiles in coordinated volleys that overwhelmed the automated point defense systems. 3 drones exploded in rapid succession. Victor Hayes brought Beta Wing around for a strafing run that disabled 2 more vessels. The human fighters moved with a fluidity that seemed almost choreographed. The Defiance reached the center of the enemy formation and opened fire with all weapons. Danny Brooks had programmed their missiles with a new targeting algorithm he had been developing. Instead of each missile tracking independently, they hunted in groups of 3. The drone's defensive systems were designed to handle single threats, but struggled against coordinated attacks. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield as missile after missile found its target. Sam Mitchell saw an opportunity and brought Gamma Wing in fast. His pilots targeted the larger command drones that were trying to coordinate the fleet's response. Taking out the command units threw the remaining drones into confusion. Their formations broke apart as individual vessels tried to respond to threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Xena covered her eyes and turned away from the view screen. She said this had been a terrible mistake. The humans were not defending themselves cautiously as expected. They were hunting the drones with obvious enjoyment. She could hear their communications chatter filled with excitement and competitive banter about who was scoring the most kills. Vareth sat motionless watching the battle unfold. In less than 8 minutes, the humans had destroyed or disabled 30 of the 60 drones. The automated fleet was losing badly against a single human vessel and its fighter complement. He told Kruve to increase the difficulty and activate the reserve units. Kruve hesitated for a moment before complying. He activated another 40 drones that had been held in reserve. These units had more advanced programming and better weapons. He hoped they would at least slow the humans down enough to gather useful data. The new drones appeared on the battlefield and immediately engaged. Captain Morrison saw the reinforcements arrive and smiled. He opened a channel to Admiral Hayes back on Guardian 1. He reported that they had encountered hostile forces and were engaging. He requested permission to use the hidden satellite network. Hayes approved immediately and entered her authorization codes. Varath heard the exchange and wondered what satellite network they were discussing. Kruve's sensors suddenly detected new contacts appearing throughout the asteroid belt. Dozens of weapons platforms that had been hidden among the rocks came online. The humans had prepared defensive positions in advance, waiting for exactly this kind of scenario. Vareth realized that humanity had been expecting trouble long before this encounter. The railgun satellites opened fire with devastating accuracy. Solid projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds tore through drone armor like paper. The automated vessels tried to evade, but the satellites had been positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. There was nowhere to hide. The battle had turned into a massacre, and the humans were winning decisively. Vareth ordered Kruve to shut down the test immediately. The Drak warrior complied, sending the deactivation codes to all remaining drones. The automated vessels stopped fighting and began broadcasting surrender signals. Captain Morrison ordered his fighters to cease fire and return to the Defiance. The entire engagement had lasted less than 15 minutes. The humans had destroyed or disabled 90% of the drone fleet while taking only moderate damage to their own shields. Xena looked at Vareth with fear in her eyes. She asked what they had just witnessed. Vareth did not answer immediately. He was too busy watching the human pilots celebrate their victory over the communication channels. They laughed and congratulated each other like they had just won a sporting event, rather than fought a desperate battle. These were not the actions of a species fighting for survival. These were the actions of a species that had been bred for warfare. Varath finally spoke in a quiet voice. He said they needed to revise their assessment of humanity. The Council had badly underestimated what these creatures were capable of. Kruve agreed and added that human tactics were unlike anything he had seen in 40 years of studying military history. They fought with creativity and aggression that suggested warfare was not just something they did, but something they understood on an instinctive level. The distant eye remained hidden in the darkness as the Defiance and its fighters returned to Earth. Varath began composing his updated report to the Council. He knew his words would cause alarm among the High Assembly. Humanity was not just another species ready to join galactic civilization. They were something far more dangerous and far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. Kruve studied the battle data for hours after the engagement ended. He ran the recordings through military analysis programs designed by the best strategic minds in Council space. Every simulation gave him the same troubling conclusion. The humans should not have won that easily. Their vessel was outnumbered and outgunned by any reasonable calculation. Yet they had destroyed the drone fleet with minimal damage to themselves. Something about their approach to combat defied standard military logic. Vereth read through Crew's preliminary analysis with growing unease. The Drak warrior had identified 17 separate tactical innovations the humans employed during the brief engagement. They used false retreats to draw enemies out of position. They concentrated fire on single targets to achieve quick kills rather than spreading damage across multiple enemies. They coordinated attacks from multiple angles simultaneously to overwhelm defensive systems. Most disturbing was their willingness to take risks that bordered on suicidal. Captain Morrison had flown his ship directly into the enemy formation, trusting his shields and his crew's abilities completely. Xena argued that they had learned enough and should make contact immediately. She said the test had proven humans were capable of defending themselves. There was no need to continue this deception. The Council should welcome them as members before someone else made contact first. She worried that other species less friendly than the Council might try to exploit or threaten humanity. Vereth listened to her concerns but remained unconvinced. He felt they had only scratched the surface of understanding human capabilities. The Council High Assembly sent new orders 3 days later. They wanted additional testing with increased difficulty. Some Council members had questioned whether the first engagement was simply luck, or perhaps a flaw in the drone programming. Vereth knew this was foolish reasoning, but he followed his orders. Crew began preparing a second wave of automated vessels with more advanced tactical programming and heavier weapons. Meanwhile, on Earth, the crew of the Defiance worked to repair the damage from their encounter. Karen White supervised teams of engineers as they replaced damaged shield emitters and patched hull breaches. The chief engineer was not satisfied with simply restoring the ship to its previous condition. She saw opportunities for improvement everywhere she looked. The enemy weapons had operated on frequencies that their shields struggled to block effectively. She started developing a rotating frequency system that would make the shields harder to penetrate. Danny Brooks sat in his quarters reviewing combat footage and making notes. The weapons officer had noticed that the enemy point defense systems tracked incoming missiles using predictable patterns. He began writing new programming code that would make their missiles hunt in coordinated packs. Instead of each missile acting independently, they would communicate with each other and adjust their approach vectors based on enemy responses. It was a complex bit of software, but he thought it might work. Captain Morrison held a briefing with his senior staff to discuss the engagement. Lisa Chen presented her analysis of the enemy vessels. She noted that their technology seemed inconsistent. Some systems were highly advanced while others appeared almost primitive. Lieutenant Chris Parker added that the enemy formation and tactics felt artificial, like they were following a script rather than adapting to battlefield conditions. Morrison agreed with their assessments. He told them to prepare for another encounter because he suspected the raiders would return. Admiral Hayes received similar reports from her intelligence teams on Guardian 1. The debris recovered from destroyed enemy vessels showed strange inconsistencies. The technology was too advanced for common pirates, but the tactical programming was oddly limited. She consulted with Colonel Ben Foster, who commanded Earth's ground-based defense forces. Foster suggested they prepare additional surprises in case the raiders came back stronger. Hayes approved his request to activate more hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system. The second wave of drones appeared 2 weeks later in the same region near Jupiter. This time there were 120 vessels with improved shields and more powerful weapons. Crew watched his tactical displays as the automated fleet moved into position. He had programmed them to use adaptive tactics that should counter the human strategies from the first engagement. He felt confident this test would provide better data about human limitations. The Defiance detected the new contacts immediately and moved to intercept. Captain Morrison studied the sensor readings and noted there were twice as many enemies this time. He opened a channel to Admiral Hayes and requested permission to engage. Hayes told him to proceed but added that Colonel Foster had some new toys ready if needed. Morrison acknowledged and ordered his crew to battle stations. Karen White activated her new shield system as soon as the first enemy shot struck their vessel. The rotating frequency design worked better than she hoped. Enemy weapons fire splashed harmlessly against shields that constantly changed their resonance patterns. The enemy targeting systems could not lock on effectively. She called up to the bridge that shields were holding at 98% efficiency. Captain Morrison told her she was getting a commendation for this. Danny Brooks launched his reprogrammed missiles as soon as they entered effective range. The weapons officer watched with satisfaction as his new hunting pack software executed perfectly. Groups of 3 missiles coordinated their approach vectors, forcing enemy point defense systems to choose which threats to engage. The missiles that got through hit with devastating accuracy. Explosions rippled through the enemy formation as Brooks kept firing. Kelly Rogers led her fighter wing in a high-speed attack run that would have terrified most pilots. She brought her craft within meters of enemy vessels while firing continuously. Her wingmates followed her lead without hesitation. Victor Hayes executed a complex flanking maneuver that caught a cluster of drones in a crossfire. Sam Mitchell held his wing in reserve, watching for opportunities to exploit gaps in the enemy formation. Crew watched in growing frustration as his improved drones fared no better than the first wave. The humans adapted to every tactic he employed. When he concentrated drone forces, the humans split up and attacked from multiple directions. When he spread the drones out, the humans picked them off individually. The human fighters moved with a coordination that suggested either telepathic communication or countless hours of training together. Probably the latter, but the effect was the same. Morrison saw his opening and took it without hesitation. He ordered Lisa Chen to plot a course directly through the thickest concentration of enemy vessels. The navigator protested that the maneuver was extremely dangerous. Morrison told her he trusted her flying and Karen's shields. Chen took a deep breath and executed the command. The Defiance dove into the enemy formation like a shark into a school of fish. Karen White rerouted power from non-essential systems to keep the shields strong. She called out status updates as enemy fire hammered against their defenses. The shields held, but she could see them weakening under the concentrated assault. She told the bridge they had maybe 2 minutes before shield failure. Morrison acknowledged and told her that was plenty of time. Danny Brooks fired everything they had while the Defiance was surrounded by enemies. Missiles and energy weapons lit up the darkness of space. At such close range, the enemy drones could not effectively maneuver. They were packed too tightly together. Brooks targeted the nearest vessels and watched them explode. Each detonation damaged nearby drones, creating a chain reaction of destruction. The fighter wing saw what Morrison was doing and adjusted their tactics accordingly. Kelly Rogers brought her wing in fast, targeting drones that were focusing on the Defiance. Victor Hayes circled around to cut off enemy reinforcements. Sam Mitchell finally committed his reserve wing, hitting the enemy formation from an unexpected angle. The coordinated assault was beautiful in its execution. Admiral Hayes watched the battle from Guardian 1 with Colonel Foster standing beside her. The ground forces commander asked if she wanted him to activate the additional satellite weapons. Hayes shook her head and said to wait. She wanted to see how Morrison handled this on his own. Foster agreed but kept his finger near the activation switch just in case. On the distant eye, Xena had stopped watching the view screen. She could not bear to see the automated vessels being torn apart so efficiently. She told Verith that this had to stop. The test was proving nothing except that humans were extremely good at killing. Verith did not respond. He was too focused on the tactical displays. Crew called out updates as more drones were destroyed. The Drac warrior's voice held a mixture of professional respect and personal concern. The engagement lasted 18 minutes before the last enemy drone was destroyed. The Defiance emerged from the debris field with moderate shield damage and minor hull breaches. Not a single human life had been lost. Morrison ordered his fighters to return to the ship and set course back to Earth. His crew celebrated another victory with the same enthusiasm they had shown before. Karen White already had repair teams working on the damaged systems. She reviewed the shield performance data and made notes about further improvements. Danny Brooks was analyzing his missile effectiveness and considering new programming variations. Lisa Chen plotted more aggressive maneuver courses for future reference. The entire crew treated the battle like a learning experience rather than a desperate fight for survival. Crew shut down his tactical displays and turned to face Verith. He said that continuing these tests was pointless. The humans would adapt to anything he threw at them. Their capacity for innovation during combat was beyond anything he had encountered. He added that if the Council tried a third test, he would refuse to participate. This was not assessment anymore. It was cruelty to keep attacking them when the outcome was already clear. Xena agreed emphatically. She demanded that Verith contact the Council immediately and recommend full diplomatic relations with humanity. She said that every moment they delayed increased the risk of the humans discovering they were being tested. If humanity learned the truth, They might refuse to join the council out of anger at the deception. Worse, they might consider the council an enemy. Vareth sat in his command chair and considered both arguments. He knew they were right, but he also knew the council would want more information. The High Assembly was cautious by nature, sometimes too cautious. They would want to understand not just how humans fought, but why they fought so well. He needed to give them answers that would satisfy their questions and concerns. He told Kruv to halt any further combat testing. Instead, he wanted a deep analysis of human military history and culture. He ordered Xena to prepare comprehensive reports on human diplomatic capabilities and social structures. He gave them 1 week to compile everything they could learn about humanity without direct contact. After that, he would submit his final assessment to the council and recommend a course of action. The distant eye remained hidden above Earth while its crew worked frantically to understand the species below them. Vareth knew that time was running out. The humans had proven themselves formidable in battle. The question now was whether they could be trusted as allies, or if their violent nature made them too dangerous to integrate into galactic civilization. The answer would determine humanity's future among the stars. Kruv immersed himself in human history with the dedication of a scholar and the focus of a warrior. He accessed every database the distant eye systems could reach, pulling information from human communication networks, academic archives, and military records. What he discovered over the following days disturbed him more than the battles had. The humans were not simply good at fighting. They had built their entire civilization around the concept of warfare. The Drac analyst started with ancient history and worked forward through time. He found records of a human military leader named Alexander, who conquered most of the known world before the age of 33. He discovered writings by someone called Sun Tzu, who had codified the principles of warfare into a text that humans still studied thousands of years later. He read about empires that rose and fell through military conquest, each one developing new tactics and strategies that future generations would learn from. Kruv compiled a list of major human conflicts, and the numbers shocked even him. The humans had fought thousands of documented wars throughout their history. Some lasted for decades or even a century. The death tolls reached into the millions for some conflicts, yet humanity had not destroyed itself. Instead, each war seemed to make them stronger and more innovative. They learned from every defeat and improved with every victory. Xena reviewed Kruv's findings with growing horror. She pointed out wars where humans had used primitive weapons like swords and spears to kill each other by the thousands. She found conflicts where entire cities were burned to the ground. She discovered that humans had developed chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nuclear weapons, and had actually used all of them against each other at various points in history. She asked Kruv how any species could survive such self-destructive behavior. Kruv explained that this was exactly what made humans so formidable. Most species in the galaxy had experienced warfare during their development, but they typically fought limited conflicts with professional soldiers. Humans practiced something they called total war, where entire populations mobilized for conflict. Every citizen became part of the war effort. Factories that made consumer goods converted to weapons production. Scientists who studied medicine turned their knowledge to creating more effective ways to kill. Children were taught to support the war through various means. The concept of total war was almost unknown among council species. Barath joined them as they reviewed the data together. He asked Kruv to show him human military doctrine from their most recent era. The Drac warrior pulled up training manuals, strategic plans, and tactical guides from various human nations. Vareth read through the documents with increasing concern. The humans had entire institutions dedicated to studying warfare. They operated military academies that taught strategy and tactics to thousands of officers. They maintained standing armies even during peacetime. They constantly developed new weapons and defense systems. What troubled Vareth most was the human approach to innovation under pressure. Kruv showed him examples from a conflict humans called World War II. At the start of that war, most fighting was done with relatively simple weapons. By the end, humans had developed jet engines, guided missiles, electronic computers, and nuclear bombs. All of this innovation happened within 6 years of desperate warfare. The humans had compressed technological advancement that should have taken decades into a brief period, because survival demanded it. Xena discovered something else that disturbed her deeply. Human entertainment frequently glorified warfare and conflict. They created games where children pretended to be soldiers. They made movies and television shows about historical battles and fictional wars. They wrote countless books about military strategy and combat. Even their sports were often stylized versions of battle, with teams competing to defeat each other through coordinated tactics. Violence and competition were woven into human culture at every level. Crew found references to human military theorists who had influenced how modern nations fought wars. He read about concepts like combined arms warfare, force multiplication, and asymmetric tactics. The humans had spent thousands of years thinking about how to fight more effectively. They had analyzed every aspect of warfare from logistics to psychology. They understood that winning battles required more than just better weapons. It required better planning, better training, and better adaptation to changing circumstances. While the council observers studied human history, technician Greg Mason worked in a laboratory aboard Guardian 1, analyzing debris from the destroyed raider vessels. Mason was one of Earth's top experts in alien technology, though before 2 weeks ago, that expertise had been purely theoretical. Now he had actual alien hardware to examine. What he found confused him at first, then troubled him, and finally made him deeply suspicious. The debris showed signs of advanced manufacturing techniques far beyond human capabilities. The materials used were exotic alloys that Earth scientists had only theorized about. The energy systems operated on principles that would take human engineers years to understand. Yet despite this advanced technology, the vessels had fought with surprisingly limited tactical flexibility. Mason ran simulations and discovered that the raiders had followed predictable combat patterns. They behaved more like training drones than actual combat vessels. Mason took his findings to Admiral Hayes and explained his concerns. The raiders were too advanced to be simple pirates, but too limited to be serious military threats. Their weapons had been calibrated to damage but not destroy. Their tactics had tested human responses without committing to total warfare. Hayes listened to his analysis and came to an uncomfortable conclusion. The battles had been tests. Someone out there was evaluating human military capabilities. She called an emergency meeting with Captain Morrison and the senior military staff. Colonel Foster attended via secure video link. Hayes presented Mason's findings and asked for their thoughts. Morrison reviewed the data and agreed with the assessment. He added his own observation that the raiders had appeared exactly when humanity achieved faster-than-light travel. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Someone had been waiting for humans to reach this milestone. Lieutenant Chris Parker suggested that whoever conducted the tests might still be watching. If that was true, Earth needed to decide how to respond. They could continue pretending ignorance, or they could take the initiative and announce their awareness. Lisa Chen supported taking the initiative. She argued that waiting put Earth in a reactive position. Better to control the narrative and demonstrate that humans were not naive primitives who could be easily manipulated. Danny Brooks worried about potential military threats. If someone was testing Earth's defenses, they might be planning an invasion. Karen White disagreed. She pointed out that any species advanced enough to conduct such sophisticated tests could probably have destroyed Earth easily, if that was their intention. The test suggested assessment rather than hostile intent. They wanted to know what humans could do, not necessarily how to defeat them. Admiral Hayes made the decision. Earth would take the initiative and signal that they knew they were being observed. She asked Karen White and a scientist named Linda Gray to work together on developing a first contact protocol. They would broadcast a message using the same communication frequencies as the raider vessels. The message would be carefully crafted to demonstrate human intelligence, technological capability, and awareness of the situation. Over the next 3 days, White and Gray worked almost without sleep developing the transmission. They included mathematical proofs to demonstrate human understanding of advanced physics. They provided examples of human technology to show their capabilities. They composed a formal message requesting diplomatic contact. The tone was professional but firm. Humans were not afraid and would not be intimidated by tests or deception. On the distant eye, Vareth completed his comprehensive report to the Council. He included all of Crew's historical analysis and Xena's cultural assessments. His conclusions were stark and unambiguous. Humanity represented the most formidable military force the Council had encountered in over 2,000 years. They possessed 3 critical advantages that no Council species could match. First, they innovated rapidly under pressure, turning challenges into opportunities for advancement. Second, they fought cohesively across large groups with minimal need for centralized command. Third, they had cultural and institutional experience with total warfare that spanned their entire history. Varath's report included military projections prepared by Kruv. In any conflict between humanity and the Council, even a Council victory would cost millions of lives and potentially decades of warfare. The humans would likely develop new weapons technologies during the conflict itself, possibly creating breakthroughs that could shift the balance of power. Worse, the humans had shown a willingness to accept catastrophic casualties if they believed their cause was just. They would not surrender easily. Xena added her own section to the report focusing on diplomatic considerations. She argued that humanity's capacity for violence was matched by their capacity for cooperation and innovation. They had formed global organizations to promote peace. They had created art, music, and literature that celebrated compassion and understanding. They were capable of great destruction but also great creation. The Council should approach them as potential allies rather than potential threats. The report concluded with Varath's recommendation. He advised the Council to extend immediate diplomatic contact to humanity. Attempting to isolate or contain them would likely fail and might create lasting hostility. The humans had proven themselves capable of defending their territory and innovative enough to eventually develop whatever technologies they needed. Better to bring them into the galactic community where their aggressive tendencies could be channeled productively. Varath transmitted the report to the Council High Assembly and waited for their response. He knew his findings would cause debate and concern among the various species. Some would argue for preemptive action against the human threat. Others would support diplomatic engagement. The decision would determine not just humanity's future, but potentially the future of the entire Council. While he waited, Varath received an alert from the communication officer. The humans were broadcasting a message on Council frequencies. He ordered it displayed on the main screen. As he read the carefully crafted transmission, Varath felt a mixture of respect and apprehension. The humans knew they had been tested. They were announcing their awareness and requesting formal contact. They were taking control of the situation rather than waiting passively to be contacted. Varath looked at Xena and Kruv. The Taurian diplomat smiled slightly despite her concerns. The Drak warrior nodded with professional respect. Varath turned back to the view screen and began composing his response. The time for observation and testing was over. Humanity had passed every assessment, sometimes in ways that exceeded expectations. Now came the difficult part of actually talking to them and determining what role they would play in galactic civilization. The Council High Assembly convened an emergency session within hours of receiving Varath's comprehensive report. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Grand Chamber on the Council homeworld. The assembly hall was designed to accommodate the diverse physical forms of member species, with specialized seating and atmospheric controls for each delegation. Holographic projections allowed members to see each other clearly despite the vast differences in their biology. The debate began immediately and grew heated within minutes. The Kreshnar delegation argued for immediate military action against humanity. Their representative stood and declared that any species capable of such violence posed an unacceptable threat to galactic peace. The Kreshnar had suffered through wars in their distant past and now valued stability above all else. They insisted that humanity should be contained to their home system until they demonstrated centuries of peaceful behavior. The Vorlani representative countered that attacking humanity would be both morally wrong and strategically foolish. The Vorlani were merchants and traders who valued practical solutions over emotional responses. Their delegate pointed out that Varath's report clearly showed any war with humanity would be costly and potentially unwinnable. Even if the Council achieved victory, the price would destabilize the entire region. Better to make allies of the humans than enemies. The Taurian delegation naturally supported diplomatic engagement. Their speaker reminded the assembly that the Council's founding principles included peaceful integration of new species. Attacking humanity because they were good at defending themselves violated everything the Council claimed to represent. The Taurians proposed immediate diplomatic contact with offers of friendship and technological exchange. The Drak representative surprised many by supporting the Taurian position. As a species with a warrior past, the Drak understood military capability better than most Council members. Their delegate explained that the humans had demonstrated not just fighting ability, but also strategic thinking and tactical innovation. Such qualities could benefit the Council if properly channeled. The Drac had learned that former warriors often made the most reliable peacekeepers because they understood the true cost of war. The debate continued for 6 hours with various species, presenting arguments for and against different approaches. Some suggested quarantine. Others proposed limited contact with strict conditions. A few wanted to offer full council membership immediately. The assembly struggled to reach consensus as the implications of humanity's existence became clearer to everyone. Finally, the council elder called for order and presented a compromise proposal. The council would extend an invitation for Earth to join as a member species, with full rights and privileges. However, humanity would be required to accept a probationary period during which their military forces would be limited to defensive operations within their own territory. The restrictions would remain in place for 20 standard years, after which they would be reviewed based on human behavior and integration into galactic society. The compromise satisfied enough delegations to pass with a narrow majority. Some members voted yes because they genuinely wanted peaceful relations with humanity. Others supported it because they feared the alternative. A few abstained entirely, unwilling to commit to either welcoming or opposing the humans. The council elder declared the motion approved and ordered immediate transmission of the invitation to Earth. On Guardian 1, Admiral Hayes read the incoming message with Captain Morrison. Lieutenant Parker and the rest of her senior staff gathered around her. The transmission was in perfect English, translated by technology far beyond human capabilities. The message explained that Earth had been under observation as part of standard council protocol for evaluating newly spacefaring species. It apologized for the deception of the testing but explained the necessity of understanding human capabilities. Before making contact, the message went on to describe the Galactic Council and its purpose of maintaining peace and cooperation among thousands of species. It outlined the benefits of membership, including access to advanced technology, interstellar trade networks, and protection under council law. It also detailed the conditions of the probationary period and explained that these restrictions were standard for species with significant military capabilities. Morrison read through the entire message twice before speaking. He noted that the council was being remarkably honest about their concerns regarding human military power. The probationary restrictions were reasonable given the circumstances. Lisa Chen agreed but added that Earth's leadership would need to carefully consider the implications of joining an organization that clearly feared human capabilities. Admiral Hayes decided they needed to respond quickly but thoughtfully. She called for an emergency meeting of Earth's United Government to discuss the Council's offer. Within 12 hours, representatives from every major nation gathered via secure communication channels. The debate among human leaders mirrored the earlier Council discussion in many ways, with some advocating caution and others pushing for immediate acceptance. The scientific community strongly supported joining the Council for access to advanced technology. The military leadership had mixed feelings about accepting restrictions on Earth's defensive capabilities. The diplomatic corps saw tremendous opportunities for cultural exchange and peaceful cooperation. After intense discussion, the United Government voted to accept the Council's invitation with the understanding that the probationary conditions would be followed in good faith. Admiral Hayes drafted the formal acceptance message. With input from Morrison and her staff, the response acknowledged Earth's understanding of Council concerns and expressed humanity's commitment to peaceful cooperation. It requested formal diplomatic meetings to establish protocols and discuss the details of Earth's integration into galactic society. Hayes transmitted the message and waited for a response. Vareth received Earth's acceptance aboard the Distant Eye with relief, mixed with continued caution. He consulted with Xena and Kruve about the appropriate next steps. Xena insisted that face-to-face contact was essential to building trust. Kruve suggested meeting on neutral ground initially, perhaps aboard the Defiance or at a location in space between Earth and the Distant Eye. Vareth decided that going to the humans demonstrated good faith and showed the Council was not afraid. He sent a message to Captain Morrison requesting permission to dock with the Defiance for formal first contact. Morrison consulted with Admiral Hayes before responding with approval. The date was set for 3 days later, giving both sides time to prepare. Vareth spent those days reviewing every detail of human culture and diplomatic customs. He wanted to avoid any misunderstandings that could damage this fragile new relationship. Captain Morrison prepared his ship and crew for the historic meeting. Karen White ensured every system was functioning perfectly. Danny Brooks made certain all weapons were secured and non-threatening. Lisa Chen studied the limited information available about Council species to understand their visitors better. The entire crew felt the weight of representing humanity to an alien civilization for the first time. The day of first contact arrived with clear skies over Earth and calm conditions in space. The distant eye approached the Defiance slowly with all weapons powered down and shields at minimal levels. Morrison ordered his ship to do the same. The two vessels drew alongside each other and extended docking tubes to create a physical connection between them. Vareth walked through the airlock with Xena and Kruve following behind. The Taurian diplomat carried recording devices to document the historic moment. The Drak warrior remained alert but kept his hands clearly visible and away from any weapons. They stepped through into the Defiance and found themselves facing Captain Morrison, with his senior officers arranged behind him. For a long moment, humans and aliens simply looked at each other. Vareth saw a species that appeared physically unremarkable compared to the diversity of Council members. They were bipedal with 2 arms, similar to many spacefaring races. Their eyes showed intelligence and caution. Morrison appeared calm but ready, exactly what Vareth expected from a military commander meeting potential threats. Morrison saw beings that were clearly not human, but not entirely alien either. Vareth's silver skin and 3-fingered hands marked him as different, but his posture and bearing were familiar. This was someone accustomed to command and responsibility. Xena's large golden eyes showed kindness and curiosity. Kruve's scarred hide and warrior stance needed no translation across species barriers. Vareth spoke first using a translation device that rendered his words into English. He introduced himself as Commander Vareth of the Galactic Council and extended greetings on behalf of thousands of species across the galaxy. He formally welcomed humanity to the larger community of intelligent life and expressed hope for peaceful cooperation between their peoples. Morrison responded with equal formality. He introduced himself and his crew, thanking the Council for their welcome. He acknowledged that the testing had been unsettling, but understood the Council's need to assess potential new members. He stated that humanity looked forward to learning from older civilizations while contributing their own knowledge and capabilities to the common good. The two leaders shook hands in the human custom, a gesture that Vareth had researched thoroughly. The physical contact sealed their agreement to work together despite their differences and mutual concerns. Cameras recorded the moment for both human and Council archives. History would remember this as the day humanity stepped onto the galactic stage. Over the following hours, both groups relaxed slightly and began actual conversations. Xena spoke with Lisa Chen about Earth's diverse cultures and the challenges of forming a unified planetary government. Kruve discussed military tactics with Danny Brooks, finding common ground in their shared understanding of warfare. Karen White showed her engineering innovations to Council scientists who expressed genuine admiration for human creativity. Captain Morrison and Commander Vareth walked to the observation deck where they could see Earth hanging in space below them. Morrison asked what Vareth honestly thought about humanity. After all the testing and observation, Vareth considered the question carefully before responding. He said that humans frightened many Council species because they were so good at warfare. But he personally believed that any species intelligent enough to build a civilization was also intelligent enough to choose peace when given the opportunity. Morrison appreciated the honesty. He admitted that humanity had a violent history, but said that humans were learning to be better than their past. Each generation tried to reduce conflict and increase cooperation. Joining the Council would help accelerate that process by giving humanity something larger than themselves to work toward. Vareth agreed and expressed hope that the relationship would benefit both sides. As the distant eye prepared to depart and return to Council space, both crews gathered at the airlock for farewells. Vareth promised to return soon with proper diplomatic staff to begin formal integration procedures. Morrison invited the council to send teachers and scientists to help humanity understand their new place in the galaxy. They parted as tentative allies, aware of the challenges ahead but committed to making the relationship work. The Distant Eye and the Defiant separated and moved apart slowly. Morrison watched the alien vessel accelerate away toward distant stars. He thought about the future and the incredible changes coming for Earth. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had neighbors now and responsibilities that came with that knowledge. Vareth looked back at the blue planet growing smaller behind them. He thought about his report and the debates in the council chambers. Humanity was dangerous, yes, but so were many species when threatened. The question was never whether humans could fight. It was whether they would choose not to when given better options. Varath believed they would make the right choice, but only time would tell if his faith was justified. The galaxy was about to find out what happened when humanity joined the community of stars.